Welcome to Overwatch. This time we're going to be discussing something that's very close to the heart of the pro community and probably one of the most frequently discussed issues facing Overwatch as an esport. That's the concept of a hero limit. This debate has been raging since, well, pretty much the start of the competitive scene, so let's go a little bit into the background just to get everyone up to the same speed on why this issue keeps coming up. At the start of the competitive scene, we actually didn't see many duplicate heroes. Beta 1 saw a standard lineup that honestly isn't too far removed from today. Mercy and Lucio as support, Reinhardt as a tank, and probably a McCree in there, and then the rest was pretty flexible. This was the simplest strategy to get to grips with: get behind Reinhardt and push. Tactics were figured out during this time, and while there were rumblings of what was to come, double Winston comps did occasionally pop up, it was honestly pretty calm and relaxed. And then Beta 2 started, Mercy got nerfed, and a little team called IDDQD started on what was affectionately called the God Comp, or the Cancer Comp. This had 5 key members, 2 Zenyatas, 2 Genjis, and a Symmetra. The 6th was a flex pick, sometimes Lucio, sometimes a Winston, sometimes something like Soldier 76, it kind of varied around. Back then, Zenyatta worked differently, by the way. He had orbs that just stayed on the target without line of sight leashing that we see now. This comp lasted for about 3 months, and Blizzard tried numerous things to fix it. The solution came, by the way, in nerfing Symmetra as well as a couple of other nerfs, reducing the shield she gave from 50 to 25 to make the Genjis a little bit more manageable, as well as bringing down Genji's damage slightly. Even then, traces were just added to the mix, and issues continued to happen. During this time, pros debated back and forth constantly about what the fix was. There was an overwhelming feeling, however, that you either ran God Comp or you lost. If the enemy team ran it better, you lost. IDDQD had 2 of the best Genjis, 1 of the best Zenyatas, and just all-round top-tier players, so, well, they dominated the scene. The issue was traced down to a few things. First, trying to fight 2 evasive flankers, Genjis or Tracers, when they're getting constant healing, covering for each other, and have boosted health pools was nightmarish. Trying to deal with 1 Tracer can be a bit tricky, but trying to deal with 2 is worse than the sum of its parts. You can't go and hunt her down after she's just recalled and get a quick pick, because the other one will swoop in and go for the kill on you. 2 Genjis just snowball all the quicker, both resetting on eliminations and dashing for a combined 100 instant damage. Still, it was beta and people were willing to wait it out, although there were some really vocal community members that didn't like playing without a hero limit. Zenyatta was eventually fundamentally changed and the God Comp went away with him. But we saw something else happen. Something, in my mind, far, far worse. The footage in the background is from the Go To Gamers Weekly number 14, the European tournament, a tournament being played with no hero limit. King of the Hill emphasizes the issue fiercely because of the overtime mechanic, but you pretty much universally see some variation on 2 Tracers, 2 Lucios, a Winston, or maybe 2, and sometimes a Zarya instead of one of the Winstons. Once overtime hits, 5 Tracers and a Lucio can become the norm. And the issue here is that, well, skill flies out the window. Whoever wins or loses feels up to a chance misstep rather than being outplayed. It's also just a pain to watch. It might look exciting if this is the first time you've ever seen it, but when it's the 5th or 6th or 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, so on, are you getting the idea yet? You learn how it's going to go. Tracers stay at the point, try and land a bomb, and if it fails then the cycle continues until one team messes up. This isn't what the pro players want to play, but it's the best way to win. It isn't what the viewers want to see either. It isn't Overwatch, basically. It isn't the game that we were hoping to be playing. It's impossible to observe and cast it properly, and it's utterly insane that, for example, if both teams run double Lucio, double Winston, and double Tracer, then 2/3 of the players in the match don't really have to aim in a competitive first-person shooter. But I hear you cry, that's just King of the Hill. Well, the comp has crept its way into other maps as well as other comps that just cause issues, things like double McCree or soldier stacking. Since launch, most tournaments ran what the pro community has dubbed the eggplant rules, don't ask why, just run with it, which is 1 hero limit, a stopwatch rule set, and no 2 control point maps. And what happened? Well, the meta stabilized and most teams ran fairly similar lineups. There's some characters that were considered pretty much staples in every lineup: Reinhardt, Mercy, McCree, and Widow pre-mid-June patch, and then Reaper and Fares sort of replaced them afterwards, but we saw occasional variants popping up with situational picks. King of the Hill especially was wildly more variable with less 4-minute overtime matches as casters called out, "Oh, another Tracer has touched the point," and she's recalled and now she's back on it. "Oh, another Tracer's come in, they've now touched the point," and so on. We're just going to keep going, desperately hoping that the game ends and releases them from their torment. But now Zero Hero Limit has come back, largely due to a Blizzard-promoted Gamescom tournament that the ESL are running, the ESL Atlantic Showdown that will be played at Gamescom. With a $100,000 prize pool, teams could not ignore it, and it runs a rule set that mirrors the competitive mode that's now in the game itself. So now the debate is back because all the teams now have to practice Zero Hero Limit meta or basically give up their shot at the tournament, which means all the other tournaments now need to run Zero Hero Limit to mirror the scrimming habits of the teams, a trickle-down effect based on what the biggest event and prize pool is. Spoiler, by the way, Overwatch's circuit, when one forms, will no doubt end at BlizzCon. It's just the way that Blizzard like it. So it's very much going to be in Blizzard's hands what rule set people will run, which is why explaining this kind of thing is so important. So that's the history, that's the context. Now let's get into the meat of the argument. We'll start with the biggest reason that no hero limit is being used. First and foremost, Blizzard don't want one. They believe that the balance in the game is possible without having a hero limit, and that the game can be fun and entertaining for players and viewers by doing this. It's a noble goal, and being frank, this is the heaviest hitter in terms of arguments. Blizzard can basically do what they like, after all, it's their game. By having the top tier players working on a no hero limit, you could argue that the balance could work faster to solve problematic comps quickly and steadily erode out things that aren't fun and things that are cheesy. I imagine Blizzard also want the pro scene and the ladder to line up with each other as close as possible, and imposing hero limits onto the casual side or even the ranked side of the game could lead to people fighting for each other over who picks what, for example. Whether or not the pro scene and the casual scene can diverge from each other somewhat is a whole other discussion, but it's nice to have everything running on similar lines. The most popular argument for no hero limit is that it can allow for more varied strategies. Purely from a mathematical basis, you have many more options available after all. This diverse toolkit theoretically leads to a more diverse scene as teams run different things and bring up comps that are carefully tailored for each part of the map they're on more closely. Except, well, this doesn't happen. The opposite does, really, and yes, this is me launching into why no hero limit causes issues, because while this idyllic view of having more options sounds great on paper, to me it's woefully ignorant of how the top tier meta operates. The teams are playing to win. Therefore, the strategy has to be both the most reliable to win and have the fewest risks associated with it, and that strategy will likely become the core standard meta with a couple of variants spreading out from it. Let's explain it with a perfect edge case. 6 Widowmakers with 6 aimbots would be utterly unstoppable. Played with 100% skill and good positioning, they'd annihilate absolutely everything. Of course, this isn't realistically feasible. It's the most reliable way to win, but it has heavy risks, namely once you include the fact that people miss, you just end up losing outright. But what happens when you have a character with high mobility and reliable damage, as well as a good chunk of survivability, who is offset with a weakness that, well, while he can kill things, it's slow? Winston deals about 55 damage per second for those curious, so let's do some rounding for the sake of simplicity and say that he kills an average enemy hero in about 4 seconds. 2 Winstons do it in 2 seconds, and can hit multiple targets, without much skill required. If the enemy team can't kill both Winstons in that time period, they lose that fight. So in this case, Winston's weaknesses are kind of eroded away and his strengths are expanded. Winston used to have a 1000 hit point barrier, by the way. A large part of why that was nerfed down to 600 was the issue of trying to break that when multiple Winstons drop them in one place. I highlight Winston because, well, he's probably the most frustrating thing to see stacked and get positive results. Relatively easy execution for reliable results. Shore up a character's weaknesses by stacking and try and exploit their strengths to an insane degree. Whether it's Tracer's evasiveness, McCree's burst, Winston's reliability, stacking heroes becomes a nightmarish issue to balance, especially at the top level. My personal favourite argument is, well, very much a part of this one, the idea of that having no hero limits can lead to interesting and varied comps. I remember when Jeff Kaplan addressed this in an interview and started mentioning a team that stacked some Winstons and Reinhardts or something and smuggled a Bastion out on King of the Hill. I had the pleasure of listening to several higher end players react to that, which I can sum up the reaction of, well, they're a low tier team and that strategy doesn't reflect what's actually happening. Because what's actually happening isn't varied. It's finding what's currently overpowered and spamming enough of that hero to maximize it. Whether it's McCree, Genji, Tracer, Winston, Lucio, it matches the pro meta in every single game. Find the current balance issue and exploit it. Whether it's Broodlord Infestor in StarCraft or Teleport meta in League of Legends, when money and careers are on the line, this is what the reality is. And, well, hey, I'd love to play Overwatch where the balance is so perfect and spot on you can play without hero limits. We aren't quite there yet. Right now, we need games to be exciting both to play and to watch. What I'm dreading seeing is Winston, Tracer, Lucio on stage deciding matches at Gamescom. What I'm dreading is an audience of tens of thousands seeing that and watching casters struggle to explain it and make hype for it. What I'm dreading is players that, rather being excited to play a match of pro-level Overwatch, are dreading it because it feels like a random slog and a grind. This isn't a healthy scene, and it isn't a scene that will last. I don't mean to sound doom and gloom, but this isn't, I don't know, a referendum to leave the EU. We can go back on this pretty easily with time. With one hero limit, we do see a variation, we do see adaptation on various areas of the map. We even see occasional cute strats come out. Cloud9's Nepal Village strat, for example, includes Bastion, or Rogue's hybrid first attack point strats, where they drop the Mercy and bring out a Tracer instead. It's really cool to see. There's decisions being made on whether or not to run Reaper or Soldier or Pharah, instead of just cramming as many people as possible onto a McCree, for example, without sinking the team because he was overpowered at the time. Sure, some heroes are very situational, and some just outright aren't picked, but would that really change in no hero limits? I think the opposite is far more likely, because there's nothing stopping you running as much of the currently overpowered thing as you need, and there doesn't seem to be a good reason to run something that might be underpowered or perhaps less useful. I worry that Blizzard are putting the cart before the horse. They're working to an ideal which sounds absolutely great on paper, get the game into a state where it's interesting and fun without a hero limit, but the reality of the process is that it could take years. And years isn't really going to work for the esports scene. In the process of writing this video, I've had a chance to see even more tournaments with no hero limit, and the amount of dismay and upset is huge not only in the pro community but also in the viewer response, especially when Tracer is the hero most prone to abuse due to the overtime mechanic. To me, this is the real nail in the coffin for any argument in favor of no hero limit. The players are not enjoying it, the casters are not enjoying it, a large portion of the viewers are not enjoying it. That is not healthy, that is not sustainable. The decision to run one hero limit again is not permanent. It can be revisited when balance issues are ironed out down the road, but right now, one hero limit in my mind provides a more entertaining viewing experience, playing experience, and is much easier to cast. I'll finish up by mentioning the edge cases, the alternatives. I've seen mention of what is called the 2-1-1-1-1 system, basically allowing you a single duplicate. That could be interesting, but just seems to be adding complexity for the sake of complexity. Spoiler, by the way, double Tracer to push overtime on every single King of the Hill. The other option, one I don't mind, is adding a one hero limit purely to King of the Hill, and also I'll probably throw 2 control point maps in there as well. Payload seems to have far less of a problem with the hero stacking issue recently, although I'd expect Winston's constant AoE damage to always remain an issue on some areas of specific maps, Numbani's cap point for example. At the end of the day, if Blizzard are furnishing the biggest prize pool, everyone will play to their rules, but I want to speak directly to some of the company's core principles. First, every voice matters. The overwhelming majority of these voices are telling you that no hero limit is a mistake in the pro scene. The ones most involved in the scene are certainly telling you it's a mistake. We're on a crash course where the finals of Gamescom for $100,000 could come down to divas being spammed over and over again on a Hanamura control point, or watching 5 Tracers tiptoe around a point in Lijiang. The second is gameplay first. The pros, the people investing their lives in this, are not having an enjoyable experience. They actively dread King of the Hill. They joke about gentlemen's agreements not to run certain comps, but then run them anyway because they can't afford not to. The long term, no hero limit could pay off, but there's no point in sabotaging the short term gameplay for the long term just to reach that. The third and final tenet that I'll speak to is the idea of lead responsibly. As a company tenet, you acknowledge that your decisions as a company have ripples across people in many different areas of the gaming industry. The decision to push for no hero limit on the pro level of Overwatch scene, it could be disastrous for very little game. It feels very stubborn, and it feels like there's a real disconnect over here. It feels a bit dictatorial. I'll re-clarify here at the close. I'm not pushing for a hero limit in the game itself or in the ranked game mode, merely in considering listening to your audience, players, casters, fans, tournament organizers, and journalists. The pro level game is more interesting, more diverse, and more entertaining when played with a one hero limit. So why aren't we doing that for now, while you figure out how to make the game work without one? Thanks for watching to the end. Lengthy coverage of this issue, but it's a big, complicated, and very important one. Remember to be polite and courteous with any feedback with anyone who disagrees with either me or you. Toodles.